Hey guys, GHAZZY TV here with another Path of Exile discussion video. In this one, we have just finished watching the interview with Chris Wilson by Zizaran and Mathil, which ended very briefly. Well, not briefly, they had about 3 hours, because Chris that fled had to go to another meeting, which I felt was a little bit so-so. But taking that aside, I will be tackling things that stood out the most for me in this discussion. And we're going to just bring that up to speed with what I feel about these things. I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm just going to dive right into it. And apparently I've seen people discuss on Twitter that if I tell you guys to subscribe, you actually will. So do that. Anyways, Spellslinger considered fine was a big thing that stood out a lot for me. Now, I understand that some Spellslinger builds still work. And I understand that there are surely builds that we haven't uncovered yet or discovered that will work. The problem with when people say the Spellslinger is dead is when you have quite an extensive amount of builds that that isn't just not viable anymore. It's just that they don't function mechanically. Like the KB Flame Wall, like Cold Slinger, Chaos Slinging. Like, it's quite a few builds that is very heavily affected by this. Then we have people like big brainy boys like John Groen, probably butchered his name in the pronunciation there, I'm very sorry, but he made a really good one with the Winter, for example. Hydrosphere, really fucking juicy. That's amazing. I'm sure we have other builds that works as well, but is that considered fine? Like, normally they praise themselves in how good they are at nerfing or balancing things, where, oh, we just shaved off a couple of % on a build. That doesn't mean that it's dead, like the community says. It will still work and still be pretty goddamn good, which is what Chris Wilson explicitly said in the interview, right? But in this case, they killed the build. They mechanically don't function. We've tried it. Two of my build guides I had to remove them. They're just not functional anymore. So I'm just going to move on. I don't want to spend too much time talking about these things. I'm just going to talk about the things that stood out the most for me. So moving on, there was a lot of Diablo 2 references. Now, Sis put it pretty good, well, actually, where he says that boomers like us loves it, but it's out of date to the modern standards of ARPGs. What I feel when that becomes the norm to compare to, the more years I'm in this game, the more I feel like people need to stop. This is not Diablo. This is not Diablo 2 either. This is Path of Exile. And how about we focus on the fact that this is Path of Exile and moving forward with that focus in mind? Because we can compare all we want to Diablo, but it's not. It's never going to be Diablo. The core design of combat is so much different. It's slower. You can react to things reactively. Not like actual reactional playstyle, whereas in Path of Exile, most things that you do has to be proactive. For example, there's so many problems in the comparison that it's getting outdated. So can we just please stop compare this to D2 when we're talking about progressing the game forward to a better state? Next thing I wanted to mention was the target farming, which seems like GGD doesn't seem to want that. Whereas the majority of the player base, based on what I've seen and heard, obviously I don't know the numbers, wants to have target farming. They've killed off so many things, and they're talking about making leagues have identifying features, like Delve has fossils, Breach has splinters, Delirium has cluster jewels. So why would Heist provide all of that more so than the actual league mechanic that they come from? That just doesn't make any sense. But they made changes to this. I mean, simulacrum farming was amazing. You could actually target farm voices. Eventually you drop one. You had a chance of getting a 1 passive up to 7 passives, and that's it, right? That was really fun to do. That's barely worth, not barely, it's not worth doing at all. Another problem with target farming is like divination cards and stacked decks. Now, I usually try to stay away from suggesting solutions, but honestly, just make stacked decks not give div cards that that drop specific boss items. Because the problem with div cards is that they're so hard to tackle since they're paid for by supporters, right? The biggest problem with cards in general, no matter if it's stacked decks or if it's div cards, because stacked decks I think there's an easy solution to, but bosses becomes less and less valued to do because the divination cards are sorting it. So whatever you could do for target farming gets killed by div cards farming. And I think that's fine. I think div cards is a great way to give you I was about to say pity dick because I watched Deadpool not too long ago, but pity reward, right? Where you can target farm a specific boss. Like let's present a scenario where you are killing a specific boss. Let's say Shaper, and Shaper now drops a div card that gives Starforge. Because you didn't drop Starforge, but you have a chance of getting the div card. So if you don't get the sword, if you do it enough times, you'll have a full set of cards that will give you the Starforge. Now that would allow you to not deterministic, but target farm that Starforge. If you run Shaper enough, you will eventually either drop it or have the cards to hand it in for a Starforge. That would be a very interesting and fun thing to do. That would increase the value of the boss fight to do as well. Even more so if this specific card was not in the stacked decks pool, specifically, or even more so if that card could just not drop anywhere else but from that. To remove them from diviners, remove them from stacked decks, and there we go. We have a solution. That would make bosses more interesting to do as well and increase the value of doing so. Make more div cards, like I mentioned, for boss-specific items to just simply drop from their specific boss. That would be a very nice solution, right? So more on bosses was Maven. There was suggested that Maven dropping elevated rares. I think that's kind of scary because there's two different factors you have to think about with that specific question. First off, elevated rares are used by endgame crafters to woke orb. Do you think casual players woke orbs items? So that would just be a glorified stack of currency that potentially can drop for most people. Not to mention the other aspect that most people don't do Maven, at least not casual players. Another thing that stood out the most to me as well was the Aurabot problem, if you will. Apparently, like I might be completely out of touch here, they said that Aurabots are a concern in the community. And I was very confused with that. I understand that auras in general are too strong. I agree with that. I think Aurabots are stupidly strong as well, for that matter. I agree with that. I just didn't understand or have seen such a big general outrage from the community about Aurabots, because I think most people are referring to Aurastackers. Maybe I'm out of touch here, and I would love to you guys hit me up in the comments below here to tell me, because I feel like a lot of people are referring to Aurastackers when they're saying Aurabots, because there's two different ones. And to elaborate on what the difference is, an Aurabot doesn't deal damage. The Aurabot is exclusively based and designed to support your teammates, whereas the Aurastacker is a build that is doing damage. It can play solo, but is ramping up the entire efficiency of its character, and the damage it's doing and the defense it has is all designed around the auras. So that's the difference. An Aurabot is a support build, an Aurastacker is a solo build. So which one is problematic in the community? Because Aurastackers have been brokenly overpowered in the past. Aurabots are really strong, but only functions in group. So I mean, where's the biggest problem here? Because the more I see about it, Chris Wilson talking about making Aurabots changes and nerfs to it, and at the same time, I feel like, isn't the community complaining about Aurastackers and not Aurabots? I don't know. Like, maybe I'm out of touch there. I don't play Aurabots or Stackers, so I'm out of myself. But please do let me know. I was a little bit confused with that. So I was just hoping that the community could elaborate a little bit on that for me. So hear what you guys think of it. So another thing when it comes to endgame was that they mentioned that people quitting the league when they have full biz gear and they don't have an obvious upgrade in sight. And I'm not sure if I agree with that, because I mean, even the top 1% player base during Harvest League played more than most other leagues that we played. And that goes for myself and many other people that I play with. We played more Harvest League than we've done in most other leagues. And we had several characters with mirror service gear. I had my Spectre build back then was about 2,600 Exalteds worth. There was a couple small upgrades I could do, sure. I made a fucking Wonder build, just shy off 1000x or something. And I had so much fun, I kept playing it. And I made new builds, and I made a Darkback build. I made so many builds. I had more fun doing that than I've had in many other leagues. So I'm not sure if people are quitting when they have full biz gear. What I think the problem is that when there is nothing left to do in the end game for the higher end game players, that's when they quit. If there is no end game, there's nothing to do. For me, even if I had full biz gear, I have so much content I could do. 100% daily, crafting with easy access to it. So I could craft a lot of things, which I did and had a lot of fun with that. I can go delving. I can do boss farming. There's so many things I could do, right? And right now, like, and now they've killed those things. So now there's nothing left to do in the end game, which means that if I don't have anything to do, why would I upgrade my character? Why would I keep playing? There's nothing to do. So that's why people quit. And if you look at the lower end of the spectrum with the people that are getting into maps, you have a problem where unless you're playing a meta build, you're going to end up hitting a brick wall, which the meta builds would just go right over because they're meta builds and they can do that with almost no investment. And the builds that can't do that, that are so-called viable, according to some people, they will hit a brick wall where they will going to be forced to upgrade the characters. The problem is that those upgrades are very hard to come by because of the way crafting is in the game, which we will be covering in our interview with Chris Wilson on the 25th, Wednesday the 25th. So make sure you tune in for that. And the problem then is that it's ridiculous amount of currency required to get past that, or you have to self-craft it. But crafting on the lower end of the spectrum is RNG based and very expensive, so people don't do it for obvious reasons. So that's a big problem in my case when it comes to that aspect. Then to move on to the other aspect of why, to move away from why people are quitting the league, and we're going to talk about what Chris Wilson said when it comes to the harvest, which is something I've talked about a lot right now. And that is that he said that he felt that harvest was being too gifty. What he's referring to is that you get too much from harvest. And this was in conjunction with a discussion of making it tradable. And he said that if they were to make, hypothetically, if they made harvest crafts tradable, they would have to make it rarer. Now, I've played an obnoxious amount of hours every league. I'm currently quite above 26,000 hours in this game. That's a lot of hours, by the way. Not healthy, by the way. I cannot recommend it. And in last league, I found one augment craft, and we had access to harvest farming. This league, so far, granted it hasn't been out for more than a couple of weeks, I have found 0 augment crafts. And I would consider myself to be one of the people that play this a fuckload. Still no augment crafts. And he's talking about making it rarer? I don't know. That is so weird to me. For that to be in conjunction with trading them. And he's saying that he feels like it's too gifty. I don't know. I feel like that is so incorrect. It's insane. And I believe I might be wrong. Correct me if you want to. Or if you agree with me, let me know in the comments as well. Am I wrong in this? Or can we agree that the majority of the player base feels that that is completely insane? Or am I just crazy? Moving on, though. So one thing that stood out a lot with this interview was that it's crucial that we, as the people that interview Chris Wilson, make sure that we provide context to our questions, which I think Zizaran Mathil did very well on, except for one thing. And in that one is that it's important that we have accurate information when we provide context. And the one thing that stood out on this was actually the Exile nerf. Now, the Exile nerf was that instead of creating 1 or 2 unveiled modifiers on an item, nowadays it will remove 1 modifier and then add an unveiled modifier on the item. And people were like, oh no, the deterministic crafting of Exile is now gone. But that's wrong. That is 100% wrong. Because they've also changed so that it will respect craft, because it doesn't count as a bench craft. That means we meta craft. That means we can deterministically craft things. Again, that is 100% deterministic crafting with Exile level 4. Because it respects meta crafts, therefore we're able to still do insane items. The crazy thing with this is that when we're saying that it's 100% deterministic, that means we're in a situation where we're in a 50-50 with a metacraft, right? Because the idea with this process is to cut the metacraft to get the craft, right? Now, I failed 3 times in a row in this. But what happens with this is the same thing that happened to Harvest. Before this nerf, a lot of players, I would say, used Ashling crafts because it was very easy to understand because it was deterministic by default. Now it requires more currency to pre-plan. There is a little feature that means that if you fail it, let's take a look at, for example, Tailwind Elusive Boots. Just a quick, I'm not going to explain the craft here, but the TLDR is this. You woke up the Tailwind together with an Onslaught pair of boots. Now that you have that, you want to make sure the suffix is filled, either through slamming or whatever you want to do. Then you put a suffix can't be changed. Now then the rest of the craft doesn't matter. And then you purge it if you have to, and make sure that you have suffix can't be changed, and you do a reforged crit. Now by doing so, you're guaranteeing 100% to get elusive. Now you have a pair of elusive with a potential a second modifier. Then you do suffix can't be changed, and you do an Ashling Slam. Now there's a 50-50 that it will take away the elusive and give you an unveiled modifier. And if that happens, well, guess what? You just do a reforged crit, put the suffix can't be changed, and do it again. If it hits the craft, you now have removed the craft, and you have a 3 or 4% risk of not getting movement speed. That is over 90% guaranteed chance of having movement speed. And you know what you would do if it failed? Suffix can't be changed, reforged crit, suffix can't be changed, Ashling. You're back on it again. It's just brute forcing. 100% will you guarantee that you will have Tailwind, Onslaught, Elusive, movement speed. Guaranteed on that item. Who does this cater to? Because this crafting process is expensive. It's kind of elaborate, sure. But it only caters to the 1% player base. But it is still 100% guaranteed outcome. And it's just a matter of currency. Then again, you can say that with other crafts as well. So maybe I'm just talking out of my ass, because a lot of things are, you just brute force 1000x and you'll have a minion helmet that is mirror tier. Yeah, okay, sure. It cost us almost 2000x last time we did it. All I'm saying is that there's a difference between, obnoxiously small percentage. We're talking about a very simple crafting, or very simple meta crafting that you need to do with this, but it is still 100% deterministic to a lot of different outcomes, and that is only one out of hundreds of different methods you can do with this. So that was the only thing I felt was a little bit but anyways, we're going to move on. Map progression will be tackled in 3.17, and Chris Wilson said, "We hear you." But question is from me, do you really? Do you really? He was saying, I don't have the quote in my head right now because I didn't type it down. He said something in the lines of people finding the campaign boring. And then he said, well, maps are more fun. Why are maps more fun? More tile sets. Who the fuck gives a shit about tile sets? The only thing we give a shit about in maps is getting George back, okay? That's the only thing we care about when it comes to maps. We want George back, okay? So we asked, and the chat said no, no, it's bad. And then he said, oh, maps are bad. Okay, well, everything's bad. But that's the problem. The problem is not the campaign. The campaign's actually pretty decent. The problem is not maps. Maps are pretty okay. The problem is that we have to go through a series of content before we're able to actually play our build. That is the main problem. You want to play Spectres? Well, play a spell-based build or SRS Popcorns or SRS or Animate Weapon until you reach Blood Aqueducts. You should probably avoid going Spectres then as well, unless you have a Tabula Rasa. Then you can start playing Spectres. Okay, that's one build, fine. Dark Pact. It's not really recommended to go Dark Pact on the Skellies unless you have the Leech support, which would be better when you have a 5-link. So that's either self-farming your Tabula and Blood Aqueducts or having the luck of a 5-link, which happens from Act 4, I think. Then you can start going into it. The problem is that we have to play something else to go through this campaign, and the reason people are having more fun in maps is because most builds are then able to be played when you get to the map stage. Then you're able to play your build. I think that's a big problem. That's just by the way I see it at least. Please correct me if you disagree in the comments below. Also to mention though, the reward structure is obviously a big thing as well. People prefer to do maps because the rewards in maps is better than what you get during the campaign, obviously. You're having a higher chance at least. Chris Wilson did mention a thing that was really good though. He said, I don't remember the topic out of the blue right now because I have a long list of things here. I just typed up some notes. He said we'll come up with a solution and discuss it with the community. And the topic at hand doesn't matter on this. The fact that he's saying that they will come up with a solution and then bring that solution to discuss it with the actual player-based community publicly. I love this. This is the main reason why we have loved Path of Exile for so long. This is what the best kind of transparency looks like, in my opinion. The fact that they're going to come up with a solution and then discuss it with the player base is how we move forward in the best way possible. So I was very happy to hear that they're doing this in that way. So I was very, 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 very satisfied when that was said. Last thing I wanted to mention is just 2 more notes on this little rant, and that is the whole thing with build viability versus build diversity. It's up to the community to work harder in finding the viable builds. That's what they said. Apparently, it's your fault that we don't have build diversity. Your fault. Probably because you didn't click the subscribe button yet, so do that. Now, I agree that a lot of us content creators, especially the bigger content creators, plays a big role in league starter builds. And outside of the videos, us streamers playing builds that we believe is good will emphasize on other people also doing the same thing. I'm going to take a few seconds to head over to a different scene, and I'm going to show you PoE Ninja. Now in here we have SST, Ray Spectre, Forbidden Rite, and this is Soul Rest. Right? This Spectral Shield Throw is generically 2 builds. It's Cold Conversion, it's Bleed. Spectres are 2 different versions, 3 actually. Forbidden Rite is Self-Cast versus Totems, and well, there's a handful of different versions from Soul Rest. We have my build, we have Grimrow, for example, a couple of others, but most notably those 2. And then it's like, those are viable. Right? And then you look down the list and you'd be like, oh, but these things don't work. But the problem is that they're not popular enough to be played. So I'm going to show you one build that I have a guide for that you can check in the descriptions below as well. And that build looks like this. This is a 5.1 million Shaper DPS wearing a fucking tabula rasa, Rumi's concoction of Darkness and Throne belt with fucking terrible gear. The helmet has a +3 mid-level minion gems with a life roll. Boots, damage balls leeching with life and mana. Like these things, there's a Chaos Lavish Leech from a hunter-based damage. It costs a couple chaos. There's a Curse and Hit ring here. That one might cost you a couple more chaos than the other gear pieces. 5.1 million Shaper DPS. This is a Dark Pact build. You know how many people are playing Dark Pact in this league? It's a very niche playstyle. And that's a Necromancer. So above level 95, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people out of a list of 18,000 people that is shown in the PoE Ninja. Yes, there are multiple builds in the community that works. They are viable, but people don't play them for a variety of reasons. Not in line with their playstyle, not competitive with the meta, not promoted by streamers as extensively as many other builds like SST, Spectres, FR, you know, Soul Rest, for example. Absolutely. The problem we have with build viability versus diversity is not the builds that are barely played that do work. It's the builds that are barely played that doesn't work. That's our problem. Absolution. Let's have a look at Absolution. 0.1. I think a lot of people actually playing this are trying desperately to make it work. There's a couple of people actually playing it. Interesting. Interesting. How about we look at Winter Orb? 0.5. Look at this. How much are we going to bet that these are Headhunters? Oh, Headhunter. Ooh. Oh, so that's a Torrent's Reclamation. That's pretty interesting. That's not a Headhunter. Ooh, I'm surprised. Actually surprised. Headhunter. Headhunter. Not the Headhunter. Title Nice. This is an interesting approach. Natural Instinct. Yeah, it's pretty high budget. Like everything you see is just high budget, but most of them will be using Headhunter. So the generic problem to this is like we don't really care that much about build diversity as much as we care about build viability. Because if the thing is, if there was viability, then it doesn't matter if there's, you know, if most people are playing 1 or 2 builds. People don't really care about that. They just want the things that are not working right now to actually work, right? And I think that's very important to bring to the table. But yeah, I don't want to expend this video too long. I hope you guys will let me know in the comments below what you guys feel about my statements, and correct me if I'm wrong in anything. Just share your thoughts in the comments, what you guys felt of what I said right now, and also share your thoughts on what you guys felt about the interview that Sis did with Mathil to Chris Wilson. Yeah, I've already told you guys to sub. I probably told you to hit the like button as well, because that helps the YouTube algorithm. Well, if I didn't, I just did, so do that, I guess. Yeah, till next time, stay safe, keep rocking.